Welcome to the Faith Science Podcast, Episode 7. I'm your host, Jerry Swafford, and on this podcast, we explore the integration of science with faith. Today, we have our first repeat guest. You first met him on Episode 2, and you may know him as the Math Guy. We are doing this interview on the morning of August 3rd, and he is currently in Cambridge. Yes, that Cambridge, the one in England. About 2 hours ago, he texted me and said, "We're finishing a tour of Cambridge, so can we push the interview back an hour?" So in today's interview, he is going to tell us why he's there. We will also talk about why middle and high school students need to learn apologetics. Our guest today is Amos Tarfa. Amos, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into why you're in England, what's new since I guess it's been about 4 or 5 weeks ago? Anything new for the math guy?
Well, we're pressing on with doing, education programs. I was really encouraged by our conversation the last time. After our official podcast, we got to talk about life and just. I really just want to say thank you. So I appreciate the friendship. And since that time, I've tried to start some initiatives on SAT prep, trying to grow. I have 6-week courses I'm going to be teaching, but I'm using the SAT prep as a tool to inspire kids to think bigger. And it's just a resource. It's a way to help them with their school. But I really want to help kids think about their career prep and life and those big issues of life. So that's number one. We're working our way through the business plan. As far as books on things that I'm going to be studying, I'm going to be studying more about James Clerk Maxwell and his work as a physicist and trying to understand how to raise the next generation of Maxwells. There's a book called The Return of the God Hypothesis by Stephen Meyer. I'm going to be working through that. And actually, I would love to do a whole series on my YouTube and then with anybody else who wants to chat about elements of the book, because I really think our young people need to dissect that topic further. So those are some things I'm working on. My wife and I are doing well. Kids are doing well as well.
Okay.
So,
And so I know you're an adjunct professor, is that correct? So
yes, adjunct instructor.
you're about to go into the fall semester, is that right?
Yes, in mathematics, I'm going to be teaching intermediate algebra at Laterno University. This is actually two things about that. One, I'm teaching math, but then I'm also working with homeschool families who want to get college credit. Like it's called a dual credit program, also with Laterno University. So my goal is really to provide the best STEM education possible in the 21st century.
Okay. All right. So, okay, you are in Cambridge, like the Cambridge University in
Yes,
England.
yes.
Like I was texting you. I was like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" And then you say, "Yeah, I'm in Cambridge." I was like, "What?" And then right after that, I saw it on Facebook. So I don't even know how I didn't see that you had one of your reels was on there. Why are you
Yeah.
in Cambridge? What's going on?
So, a quick backstory, and then I'll bring it to the present. But when I went to America in 2007, someone asked me, "What are your 30 goals for life?" This was one of our health classes, and one of my goals was always study the greatest universities. That was always in the back of my head. I want to study the greatest universities, and then someday, when I have the funds and the means, let's make a new great university. Something to that effect, I think, was part of the equation. And so last year, I came to Cambridge and Oxford. Actually, I brought some students and just studied the history of science, studied some of the impact of these universities on modern civilization, so to speak. So then this year, I had this opportunity to get involved with an apologetics conference, basically, or like an opportunity for a seminar series that was going to be happening at Cambridge. And it was going to be about 17 days, but I'm like, man, this is going to be a wonderful opportunity to connect again with people like Dr. John Lennox and Dr. Stephen Meyer. And so that was part of how this equation came out. Um, I I'll just tell you this, there's Cambridge University has a special spot in my heart, partly because now Isaac Newton came here. It's not just because of Newton, right? I've been joking that there's different denominations in science. I'm a Maxwellian. I'm not a Newtonian. Okay, there's the Newtonians. I'm a Maxwell guy, and James Clerk Maxwell came here. And one of the things that I was excited about was actually going to the Cavendish Laboratory. This is the Cavendish Laboratory. And James Clerk Maxwell started that lab. It's the physics department of Cambridge. And when I got here, I literally emailed them, "I need to come. Can I come?" So I went there and I saw the lab, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow. I mean, 30 Nobel laureates have come out of this lab. I mean, this is one lab, right? And so I would say that I'm so passionate about some of these scientists who not only did a great job in their science, but also talked about God. And that's why Cambridge, I believe, is going to be one of these things where I want to come back every year, if I can, and maybe bring some people with and just, talk about the impact that people like Maxwell, Newton, Ramanujan, the mathematician, he's of a different faith, but just in terms of excellence in mathematics, I love talking about that. So that's part of why I'm here in Cambridge is apologetics and growing in that, but also the opportunity to begin a pathway for Americans to come here, actually, because I mean, there's so much history here, and this is part of why I had to take off the time and run over here.
And so this is a 17-day conference?
Yes, yes, it's more of a
Okay.
seminar series.
Okay. And so what's the name of this?
It's just a colloquium. That's what it's called. It's like a colloquium about the creation and understanding natural theology. So,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
So natural theology, isn't that the older term for basically science? Is that right?
Yes,
Like what?
yes, that was part of it. Well, natural philosophy was the name, old name for
Natural
science,
philosophy.
but
Okay.
natural theology is what some of the early scientists would have said. People like John Ray, or people like, there's quite a few of them, but that was one of the things they were trying to do is show the manifestation of God's works. And even Isaac Newton was trained in that tradition. One thing people might not know about Cambridge is Cambridge came as an offshoot of Oxford. It's almost like think of a rebellion. So Oxford was the first in England, and then Cambridge. Some of people moved over to Cambridge, and Peter's College became the first college. So we're talking about 1209, somewhere in the 1200s, and that's when Cambridge began. But part of what Cambridge's legacy is all these scientists that were very good at philosophy. That's what I'm trying to recreate. And so that's why I'm actually going to record some videos tomorrow, standing in Trinity College, going over to different parts of Cambridge, because I really need to remind the public that the top scientists were people of faith and people that didn't see a conflict between science and faith.
Yeah, yeah. So I was my most recent podcast, it was called Evolution is Not Scientific at All. And I got
Yep.
some people in the comments that were pretty some atheists in the comments that didn't like it, I guess. And so it was interesting because their assumption is that science and religion, or science and faith, are at odds and they are
Yep.
contradictory, and that you must be appealing to magic or miracles if you believe in a creator, which is
Yep.
again exactly the opposite of those who originated modern science. So they
Correct.
called it things like natural philosophy, natural theology, that these were the precursors to modern science. And so
Yes.
there was a sense that you to not believe in that their belief in God is what led them to want to explore the cosmos and explore mathematics and all of these things that we now somehow have. I think again maybe that part of this is Satan that has co-opted this and now has gotten an association of science with something other than faith, and so we
Correct.
got to rebrand it back to what it originally was. I think that's what you're
Yep.
working on.
Yes,
And
sir.
the colloquium has already started where
It
you
has.
are.
Yep. Yep.
So what are your highlights so far as who's spoken, or was there something that you have heard so far that really hit home for you?
So one of the things I've actually worked on, and by God's grace, maybe you're gonna have to encourage me as a brother to make sure I keep developing this, maybe into a book someday, a separate book on this. But one of the topics that I'm passionate about is the origins of the scientific revolution. And a few years ago, I gave a talk on that topic. What caused the scientific revolution? So this is Amos, as a physicist, chemist, coming up with some historical sort of philosophy discussions on this topic. And of course, in one sense, there might be a little bit of, do I have the authority or the audacity to touch this? But I did. I touched it because I believed I had a point to make. And then at the conference, that was confirmed. The very things I said was confirmed by a sociologist of science. It was confirmed almost down to exactness. And here's what I mean. The scientific revolution started in the 1500s. And so what I was trying to understand is, why do we see pretty much discoveries at a very sort of lower rate, and then all of a sudden from 1600 we see a spike? Why is there a spike? And that was what I was trying to study. So a few years ago, I came up with my hypothesis, and I'll mention what they are. Number one, I believe that the printing press laid the groundwork. That was number one. We had a mechanism that came in around 1450. So now we have a mechanism ready to go. And then in 1517, Martin Luther and the Reformation, That begins to happen. So now more people can read their Bibles. And then in 1553, Copernicus, he released his book later on in life, close to when he died, because of some of the backlash he knew that he would face. It was a heliocentric view of the solar system. So you take the printing press, the Reformation, and the Copernican Revolution, and Galileo comes along, right? Guess what? We have an explosion after those people. And Galileo is not necessarily one of the only parts of the equation, but I put him there because he's the precursor to Newton. He dies the year Newton is born. And so when you look at about 15, I call it 1524 to 2024, 500 years. I wanted a round number. So let's just go to 1524. From 1524 to about 1724, look what happened in our world. I mean, just look at that window of time. And if you want to extend it a little further, let's say 1520s to 1870s, that's look at the top mathematicians, look at the top classical musicians, look at the top chemists and physicists. They literally are all in that window. And so there's some causes, I would say, and I think the Bible and faith played a huge role. That's one of my hypotheses, is that the Bible played a huge role in the scientific revolution. And even non-Christian scholars, I'm seeing this more and more, even non-Christian scholars are agreeing to that fact. Even the people that don't, they don't like that reality. It's like, if you know your history, you know that Kepler and Galileo and these guys wanted to study the works of God. And so methodological naturalism and this idea of atheism and neutral science, all of these things, we really need to examine more closely. They just don't carry any weight. What carries weight, though, is when people realize that, you know what, if there is a God and he created the world, there's going to be order. And if there's order, we should be able to study that, and maybe mathematics can help us, and look where we are today.
Yeah. So, yeah, mathematics has been called by one older scientist that it's the language of God. And so you see this idea of math being something that is a language that is
Yep.
discovered rather than something that we came up with. We just
Yep.
discover the math. We don't actually we don't make 2 + 2 = 4. We actually
Right.
discover it. And so
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So you are wanting to push that so you heard your hypothesis confirmed, I guess, is what
Yes.
you're saying. That they're
By
saying the
people
same
who
things.
Yep, by people who actually study that, like the people that actually have PhDs in that. So I
Mm,
don't have a PhD in the history of in philosophy of science at this point, but I just had an observation as a mathematician, and I made some, I began to connect some dots, and clearly there's a huge role that faith played in the origin of modern science.
okay. And so I guess your application to modern times, let's say in America, would be something like, if we want to see a scientific revolution, then faith is going to figure heavily into that. Would that be correct?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things there. I see what you're saying. The things I want to say, number one, is we need to stop telling lies. That's number one. It is a
Okay.
lie. It is a flat out lie if you think that faith hinders science. That's a lie. It doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, James Clerk Maxwell, who I talked about earlier, without Maxwell, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There would be no, technology of this level, right? He's the father of electrical engineering, changed the world, right? But he believed that light was electromagnetic radiation. He believed certain things that, in one sense, people couldn't see or explain at the time, but there were implications of his belief. And look where we are today, right? Faith is key. And so I'm just saying, faith played a huge role for these guys. So can we please stop the narrative in America of this idea of telling young people you can only choose between God and science? Please do your homework. That's what I'm saying. Please do your homework. And at least acknowledge, you might not like these people, but acknowledge that, okay, Newton in his Principia talked about God. Okay, it's awkward, but he did. And today you bring up God in the conversation, they almost tell you like, hey, put that in a different department. We don't need to be talking about that. So how do you explain the origin of the universe then? How do you explain the origin of information? How do you explain these things? You don't have an answer. Why are you shutting down people that want to have conversations that go beyond science, but that can explain the origin of why science works? I just think, and by God's grace, I think there's this element of my life where I need to, again, I say this in love and I want people to hear me out. Maybe you notice that my tone has changed in the last 6 weeks, but I think we need to stand our ground on what's true. And this is a fact that we can study together, that some of the top scientists There's a book here called Scientists of Faith. Some of the top, I bought this years ago, but some of the top scientists, Michael Faraday, I mean, these guys are not like some guy who did one thing in the corner. No, these are the people that gave us the foundation of science, a lot of the scientific work we do today. And compare that with some of the people like Hawking, who also came to Cambridge. And I'm actually hanging out near where Hawkins went to school, and I went to where he was a fellow earlier today. But Hawking and some of these guys in physics, they were trying to, I say past tense because Hawking has passed away, but they were trying to find other explanations for the origin of the universe. Anything but God, anything, like let's come up with any mathematics. And what's crazy, one of the things that somebody mentioned recently is we are not anywhere closer to a discovery from science for the explanation of the origin that we're seeing now. We're nowhere closer than we were 50 years ago. It's like, how much time do we want to give people who want to go around in circles to explain away the reality that this universe is fine-tuned, and it seems like it just seems like somebody created it. Can we just maybe deal with that reality? Instead, we have physicists spending their years and lives literally trying to come up with equations to maybe prove a different alternative hypothesis. So number one, I was saying is that we should just face the truth. I think our culture is lying to young people. And then number two, if our young people will do their science well and are willing to dig into the scriptures and study the scriptures and study people like Maxwell, I do think that we will have some top scientists, yes, if they're willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Okay. So yeah, there was a lot there, but one of the things you said that's interesting is that in your estimation, there are people that are doing work that is you're trying to find something other than what we believe the truth is, which is that God created the heavens and the earth. So they're spending their intellect and their years on a issue that is actually you can pretty much understand what has happened. And
Yep.
Stephen Hawking did all of that work
Yep.
only to really not contribute anything of substance really to science. Like what is there substantively compared to, let's say, Maxwell or
Yep.
Newton or these other people? I think we'll look back and say that was a wasted talent potentially. And so that's an
Well, let me just
interesting
say
thing.
not to play devil's advocate, but I will say,
Sure.
I want to clarify something there, because I asked the physicist that question and
Yeah.
about Hawking, and he did say that Hawking did contribute some things in physics. He did. That's a fact.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, his philosophy, this was said about him close to, I think, in his obituary, but his philosophy of science and some of his work in this area, that's where I would say, yes, that's unfortunately some things that time could have been used somewhere else. But he did do some things that do match up with science, if that makes sense. So
Right.
let me just say that
Right.
he was a great
Right.
intellect, but could he have done maybe some cooler things if he maybe didn't push back in this issue? I think so, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to make it seem like if you're an atheist, you can't do good science either, right? Because
Correct.
then that's the other side of the spectrum. That would not be true, of
Yes,
course.
sir.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you think that this is not just something like for, let's say, college age students or for adults to be thinking about, but that middle school and high school students need to be thinking deeply about apologetics or need to be taught how to
Yes.
think in terms of apologetics. First of all,
Yep.
define what apologetics is, and then why
Yep.
is it that middle and high school students need to be thinking about this?
So when we talk about apologetics, we're talking about the reasons for the faith. Like, why do you believe what you believe? First Peter chapter 3, verse 15 talks about being able to give a reason for the hope that you have. So Christians, why do you believe in Christianity if you're a Christian, right? Is there evidence for God? Is there evidence that should cause you to stand firm on the faith that you believe? And there is evidence, and some people don't know that. So then they end up in college. Sometimes colleges like this, and then they say things like, "I don't believe anymore." Well, what is the reason? Like, what changed, right? And I feel like we're not equipping our young people enough, and that's something we need to focus some more energy in. And so apologetics deals with giving a reason for the hope that we have. So examples for it would be when we see the fine-tuning of the universe. That could be a tool in science and faith apologetics, because the universe does have some specific details that have to be in place in order for you and I to be alive. So that's an interesting point, and it makes atheists uncomfortable sometimes. And they've asked, some atheists, what is the question that, or what is the thing that makes you most uncomfortable? And they asked Christians the same. Don't get me wrong. The Christian side would say things like the problem of evil. The atheist side would say things like fine tuning of the universe. Because if our Earth was, closer to the sun, and if certain things were not where they are now, and even some of these big planets that help us deal with some of the stuff trying to come towards, that might have tried to come towards Earth, there's just so much that's going in our favor. So then the question becomes, can we use that as a tool to defend our faith? And yes, I would love to create more modules on that, on science and faith apologetics. There's also apologetics that is focused on social issues. We talk about the LGBTQ and so on and so forth. Like, there's different topics there that people can learn. So that's where apologetics comes in. For our young people, I feel like, again, we need to give them more time to think through these issues before they show up to Cambridge. So I want to help people who want to go to MIT, Cambridge, or whatever university, but especially these top universities. And I want them to hopefully be a light. Go out and be a light and show how you can learn about faith and in God and grow in it while you learn about your discipline. That's part of what I wanted to address with the topic of apologetics for middle school and high school. There's one more thing I want to say about it, and you're welcome to go in any direction with it. But
Sure.
When I was coming, and just as I've looked around, I feel like we're going through an interesting point in our history right now in the world. The social media platforms and the internet and cell phones and unlimited data, a lot of that now has hit its 10-year mark, right? We've had this 10-year anniversary. And we're looking at young people today, and what I'm realizing is that some of them are just walking around feeling empty. Like, I just see an emptiness, and I read about some of it and some of the challenges they're facing. And I think part of it is they've been told there is no meaning, no objective meaning, right? That's where naturalism as an explanation in science can make them think there's no meaning. That scientist is smart. Look at him. He got a Nobel Prize. And he said that life began by chance. So I just need to live my life knowing there's no meaning. No, that's not true. There's meaning and there's purpose. And so one of the things I really want to drill into, and hopefully maybe someday you and I can do this in person with a bunch of young people, is we need to tell them the apologetic side, but then we also need to show them how to live. There's just so much there that these young people don't know how to live. And so we have a lot of people with loneliness and sadness and, does my life matter? And hopefully if you're watching this podcast, young people, I want to remind you, your life matters because you were created in the image of God, and there is evidence to justify that belief. Even though the Bible itself is sufficient, if you want to see things outside of the Bible, the evidence is there. And I would love to have those conversations with young people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even Scripture says the heavens declare the glory of God, and the
Amen.
firmament shows His handiwork. There's a sense in which, in the creation, God has put clues there and evidence there. Romans 1 says, so that you are without excuse. So
Yes, sir.
anyone in the end can't say, "Oh, well, there's just nothing there." And that's sometimes what you hear people say. Well, there's
Yeah.
nothing. There's no evidence, and to say that, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's no evidence of, let's say, evolution or something like that. That I think is, I think you can twist evidence and make it mean
Yep.
something else. But to say that there's nothing that could ever suggest anything other than a certain viewpoint is, there's something about that I need to make sure I'm not doing that in the case of something that's more atheistic. So
Yep.
that is something that you're wanting to really impress, and you have. So I was playing some online chess with your son the other day, and
Yeah.
how old is he? Is
11.
he so he's middle school age, right?
Yep.
So is that part of when you think about how you're training him, and I think he's in homeschool. So
Yep.
how do you work in these aspects of apologetics with him, and make sure that he is someone who is growing into a young man of faith?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One way is he has sat in and listened to some of my teachings, and so he's gonna hopefully continue that, God willing. Like when I speak at a church or an event. But more specifically, this school year, I'm going to be intentional of taking resources like Scientists of Faith, and we're just going to learn some stories of people. And that's something that, again, this could be its own sort of series of videos of just short stories of scientists. But yeah, so that's one thing we're going to do together. I am actually working to build the curriculum out right now. That's my goal, is to build out a curriculum that can break apologetics down to the middle school age so that they can go through it, and then the high school age can also go through some of the resource. So that's something I'm literally working on in real time. So if there are apologists out there that also have the passion, of course, I'd love to chat. And if you have any insight for me, sir, I would take it as well. But what I want to do is create a 6th grade to 12th grade curriculum that basically every year from 6th grade, kids can learn things like scientists of faith and the history of certain theories, and then the implications of certain theories and what it has to do with the Bible. Those are some of my hopes and aspirations. So I'll be doing that more with my son. Thanks again for playing chess with him. He said you were very good and you beat him, but he'll be back, I promise.
Yeah, he'll be back. He was wanting to play me in these like 1 minute games where you're just
Yes,
having to play really, really fast. And then sometimes
yep,
you can lose because you run out of time. So he almost
yes.
got me a couple times, but I had a little bit of time left, and I think he ran out of time. So I was like,
Yeah,
please, let's play some 3 minute games or something else, so that I
yes,
can just focus on trying to play better. But yeah, it's
yes.
fun. So yeah, we got to play some yesterday. But
Well,
yeah,
thank
so
you.
yeah, sure. So what is so what would you is that, if I were to say, like, what are you currently kind of excited about moving forward, in particularly where you're in Cambridge right now? Is there
Yep.
somebody that's like about to speak next week that you say, oh yeah, he's coming and he's gonna be speaking about this, or she, or like, what is there that you're kind of excited about with the remainder of this conference?
Well, so first of all, I'm using some of my time personally, free time, to try recording a series of talks, right? I have a friend who actually volunteered to follow me and record. So we're going to
Okay.
record a series of talks. And so those talks hopefully can become a resource for our apologetics course, maybe, but also for I'm writing okay, so this is something I'm excited about too. So I'm writing a chemistry and physics curriculum right now. And I've finished a math curriculum. If you remember, I did the counting to calculus framework.
Yeah.
By God's grace, I think with the introduction of a book, which I'll send you a picture later if you want, it's called Understanding Mathematics from Counting to Calculus. So now I distribute that book for families, but I also have like a video course that covers a lot of those topics in the book. What that book is basically, think about 1st grade math to calculus 2. Imagine if you could put it into one book. That's what we've done with this project, is we've been able to find a way to condense all of it into that. So I can literally take students in 3 years and give them all of American math in 3 years. That's actually for those who are lazy. The lazy
Okay.
kids will do it in 3 years. If you're serious, we do it in a year. We call it good. So if you give me a 7th grader right now who says, I love math, I want to be an engineer, they'll be in calculus in 9th grade. Like they'll be in calculus, no questions asked. So I'm excited that we're done with that project. The solution to the American math problem has come. We thank God. And it's that kids need to not use the American math program. That's the solution. Don't
Okay.
follow American math. The solution to American math problem is use Singapore math or India's math or Nigeria's math. If you want to be good at math, use Singapore math. That's it. There's no debates there. American curriculum in K-12 math space is a joke compared to their counterparts. It's terrible. And so what we need to do is look at the people that are flourishing. And so anyways, we've looked at Singapore and we've been able to look at just how can you be 15 years in a row number one? Like, what are you doing? What are you, why are you number one all the time? Well, we got their books, we've looked at it, and it literally matched up for the most part with the work we did in the counting to calculus framework. So our counting to calculus framework is sufficient. Singapore math mimicked it and like that, similar. So now between the two, so I actually use both, which guarantees me the opportunity to help every student to be the best. There's a whole book called The Secrets of Singapore Math. I mean, think about that. There's a whole book on that. It tells you something. So anyway, so praise God, we're done with the math. What about chemistry and physics though? What do we do about that? Because our science is not necessarily much better either. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking our chemistry, physics, and physical science, and the same thing I did for math, I'm integrating them into one curriculum. The reason why I'm integrating them into one curriculum is because things like the atomic theory of the atom or the atomic theory, it's a chemistry and physics. It's the same people. It's the same story. Why don't we just put them together? Why don't we allow chemistry and physics? And guess what? Bring that math I talked about, bring that to wrap it all together. So I'm excited that we might be able to get into the STEM field, into the science curriculum field. So basically, we want to own the corner in math and science, and then bring in the theology and history and philosophy of science. So see, we want to give a comprehensive view that produced people like Maxwell and Faraday. So that's kind of the long-term goal. How do we recreate the curriculum structure that produces the top scientists? That's what we're seeking to do.
Okay. Huh. So you've got the math pretty much squared away, you think, and so
Yep,
now you go on to the chemistry and physics, and that
yep,
kind of covers the science bases, and then you're
yep,
going to want to integrate those into one, and then when you add the faith aspect and integrate all of that, then you have something that's more comprehensive. So
yep.
do you consider things like reading or or some of these other things, do you think that is part of the issue with the American system, that maybe we're doing other things that aren't useful? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like what when you think about a comprehensive system, or I'm thinking about this as I'm saying it, but I guess in your case, I mean, you can't really talk about faith and stuff if you're not also applying the reading aspect and comprehension and that kind of thing. So, like,
Yep.
how do other things that we generally are highlighting in the school system, how do those figure into your comprehensive long-term education plan?
Yeah, so by God's grace, we have the company called the Learning Institute for Excellence. So that's a company
Mhm.
I started. I've started a branch out of Texas, and the focus of that is actually to think of an alternative to Khan Academy that has a faith aspect. And part
Mhm.
of what I'm doing with that is, and it's good you brought that up because I'm about to drop one more secret in the equation. So we have the math, but math, physics, and chemistry were actually they're very closely connected. As a matter of fact, calculus came about by studying astronomy and the planets and so on, and the physics. So Newton's calculus and calculus in general is dealing with physics. We should teach calculus and physics together. This idea of breaking subjects down, some of it is actually not healthy. It's not good. It's not the best way to go. The integrative approach is better. But here's one more thing about Amos that's kind of weird. I actually love the classics as well. So what I'm doing is, if you eventually, the goal and prayer is that you can take one box from the life curriculum series, let's just call it that. In that box, you will have all the math you need, all the chemistry, all the physics, and all the literature classics and writing in the same box. Now, I'm going to use curriculums like the Institute for Excellence in Writing, Lost Tools of Writing. These are curriculums that are very standard for homeschoolers, but you can infuse it with my curriculum of science and math. And so the idea would be I'm giving the writing opportunity to some other company, but it's still within the scope of what I want to see. And I'm providing the math and science. So homeschoolers should be able to just pick up one box from us. And in that box, they have their English, history, which is combined. Because if I'm studying the history of Egypt, why don't I read books in literature tied to Egypt at the same time and write papers about Egypt? So you're doing history, English, literature at the same time. And then for science and math, Amos has already integrated it. And literally what we're going to do is put them together. And so, for example, if we're talking about the 1600s and Isaac Newton, you're going to read the literature books that came out in the 1600s. You're going to read about Isaac Newton's calculus and its physics, and you're going to learn the physics and calculus. So you're going to learn the history, the physics, the math, and you're going to write papers about it, which would improve your English. Combine that all together, and now you're looking a lot like the time of Isaac Newton. That's why we're doing it that way.
Okay. So
So,
so then that combines everything. I'm curious about this. When you say the classics, how does one figure out what the classics are exactly? I was kind of on the I I I felt like I wasn't well read for, a few years back, and so I started trying to figure out, okay, what are the classics? Because I don't
yeah.
think I probably read some of them, but not all of them. How do you determine what the classics are and what's not in the canon? Let's say literary canon.
So I mean, there's two sets of books that are like there's the Harvard set of classics, and then there's one that was written by Mortimer Adler about the books of Western civilization. If you
Mhm.
take either of those, you're going to be just fine. Those two they're very comprehensive, 50 books. Now, are there some books that could be outside of that? Yeah, potentially, but the Harvard and Mortimer Adler, who again did an excellent job. He was involved in education and I believe came to faith later in life or at some point, but he did a great job of compiling that list. Within that, though, there are some people that if you don't read them, then that list is false. There's some people that make the list, right? It's kind of like saying who are the best basketball players and someone doesn't list Michael Jordan. You know that it's
Mm.
sketchy. And so, who are some of the people that they have to be there? Aristotle has to be there, right? Aristotle's ethics, Aristotle's writings, right there, he makes the cut. Newton's Principia technically would make the cut, but it's a little technical for people. I heard someone talking today about they couldn't understand it, so I joked and told them, you don't need to read the whole book, and I haven't read the whole book, okay? I'm going to read it, but one thing that I told them is you just need to tell people, while I was reading Principia earlier, and then you'll sound smart. That's all you need to say. Say, while I was reading, you know?
Right.
But no, I'm teasing. So I would say the Greeks, the Romans, the writings of Aristotle, and some of those people played a huge role. There's a guy that I just bought his book. They have a used bookstore, and I saw one of his books there. His name was Plutarch. And Plutarch is also another guy people need to probably check out and see.
Okay. So there's a list of maybe 50 or so works of and that
Yes.
you would be saying that these students from middle school through high school be working through these 50 works over the course of
Yes.
their career, and you say all of that would be in you'd want all of that to be in one box where you have all of the instruction for or is this a 1 year box
Well,
when
it's a
you're
year by
talking
year
about this
box.
idea? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just trying to figure out what if that was a year box or is that a 12-year box? Like what's in this box? It's
I
for
would say
one
it's a
year.
Yep, for 1 year. So if you're in sixth grade, but here's the catch. I don't believe, okay, this is the other thing, Amos is strange on this, but I'm learning, I'm getting to a point. Maybe it's just age, I'm getting old. I don't have time for things that don't work. And the K-12 system doesn't work. Like there's no time for that, right? And here's what I mean by that. We are in the AI age. Like this is not 1521. Like you want to learn calculus? Okay, get the books you need and go learn calculus. What are you waiting for somebody to tell you, okay, now you're done with this. Okay, you're going into sixth grade. No, 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 no. That's not how you learn. That's completely obsolete. And then the AI age came. It was already obsolete with Google when we just had Google. But now I can tell ChatGPT, can you give me 15 examples of a polynomial division problem? I mean, like, why aren't we doing that? And I think the answer is because there's no vision. When people don't have a vision for life, it ruins everything. What people need is a vision. And so let me explain. Let me give one of my concerns. So I'm a medical physicist. I never took theoretical physics and Einstein's theory of general relativity because I wasn't working in that space. But one day it just dawned on me. I don't know how it came about, or I just saw a YouTube suggestion, and it was a guy who had a general relativity class. And so while I was doing some work, I said, let's listen to general relativity. And so I listened to his lecture series, and I'm just like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Like, if you know general relativity, that should be all joking, but you should literally be telling everybody about it. Like, hey, have you heard that Einstein got something right that Newton got wrong? You know what I mean? And so the idea is general relativity is weird. Like, it just changed my mind. And so when I think of general relativity, I bring it up because the professor said something. I mean, this guy's phenomenal. He has a channel called Physics for Students, and he's phenomenal in communicating physics well. Later, I found out that he actually is an English instructor or like communicative English. So it makes sense. He's a physicist, but he also teaches English in India. So here's what's fascinating about this. He said, if you want to learn Einstein's theory of relativity, you need to know partial differential equations. So he lists all these courses. So guess what Amos did? I'm going to learn partial differential equations. I have a vision. I want to understand Einstein. If our young people are thinking of life like that, you should be done with your K-12 education in like 8th grade. Like that whole thing should be done in 8th grade. Your high school should be literally college focused on the thing you want to do. So for example, I'll just say this quickly. Electrical engineering is a budding field. It's a great field. And I encourage young people to check it out, partly because Maxwell was the father of electrical engineering. But why wouldn't you look at what it takes to be an electrical engineer and then reverse engineer it down to your plan? And here's what's crazy. Even if you pivot in life later on and you don't become an electrical engineer, you would have taken calculus 1, 2, 3, and physics 1 and 2, and so on. Guess what? You literally can do anything with your life at that point because you've been trained in the things electrical engineers are trained in. So you didn't lose. It's not like you finish it and then it's like, look at my life now. I want to become a sociologist. My life is a waste. No, you will be a better sociologist for the most part because of your calculus and so on. Now, nothing against sociologists except the ones who teach nonsense. But the point is, we need young people to have a vision. We need to push that. Vision first, then education. Without a vision, the people perish. Without a vision,
Right.
there's confusion. And America is a land filled with visionlessness.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, if
Sorry if
we
I
can.
sound feisty today.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're on 10 today. So that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, AI and robotics, or AI specifically, that's kind of my area. So it's interesting to, because I hadn't heard you talk about the integration of AI into what you're talking about in terms of the
Yes.
curriculum building, but you would essentially be helping students and families to take advantage of the fact that we are in the AI age, and
Yep.
using that to make it actually easier to develop curriculum and stuff like that, that's
Yep.
tailored for the student specifically and the vision that they have, rather
Yes.
than just having this cookie cutter approach where every student has to go through the exact same thing, um, is interesting, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that you can
Yep.
compress everything into a few years and then
Yep.
focus on what do you actually want to do, instead of coming to college and spending 4 years trying to, or more, trying to figure out what you want to do.
Yep.
Okay, so
That's why.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say. I mean, that's really part of my heart cry, and part of why I say that, brother, is because like life is short. Like there's no time to be wasted. So here's what's crazy: if we believe in creation, it should change how we teach. It should change how we educate, because God creates us differently. For example, there were some people that were going to go on a tour to see rocks, for example, or something with rocks. I like when I hear rocks, I literally just want to go sleep. Like I don't personally care about rocks, right? I'm not saying it because I don't think they're special. God created the world and they're special. I know, but here's the thing: it doesn't get me excited, right? But if you told me, hey, Amos, do you want to walk to Edinburgh and look at some of the work of James Clerk Maxwell and mathematical physics and do some math along the way? I'm like, let's go, right? So I'm wired differently. And right from a young age, I did math for fun at some stages, I guess. But math was something that really got me excited. When I talk about math with certain people, they're not that excited at all. So clearly, we're wired different. And some of that wiring shows up when you're 8 years old. And if we believe God made and created us, then why aren't we pouring into those things? It's not like I'm saying I want to be an actor and you tell me, Amos, do you know that the number of people that become actors is limited? Or if I say I want to be in the NBA, no, no, no. If you want to go into math and science, there's a huge pool. There's a huge wide opportunity. So if somebody has the leanings, why don't we fuel that passion? That's what I'm saying. Fuel the passion. And so I really look forward to what the Lord would do, through our friendship and connections we have with other people. But we really need to do what Booker T. Washington did with education in a different way. We need to start schools and education programs and homeschool co-ops that make vision the direction, right? And so if you have a company that needs engineers and so on, well, and we have these middle schoolers and they like engineering, well, let's build our network of engineers right from 6th grade and 7th grade, because they'll be better in that they've had more time to practice. It's kind of
Right.
like when you see a mechanic. Like when I see an engine, I'm just like, this is too much. I do better with math on paper. I can't handle seeing an engine and trying to figure out how it works. Some people can do that. And if you ask them, when did you get passionate about the engine? They would say things like, my father and I used to look at car engines. And so they were looking at car engines at a young age. I wasn't looking at car engines. I was looking at books and paper. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the integrating the education with things like industry, like kind of what we've talked about, is what we should, really be thinking about. I was talking to
yeah,
somebody the other day, and they were, people find out I do AI stuff, and he was asking me, did I think AIs could become sentient, meaning can they actually become aware? And I was saying that I didn't think so. And so we got into this uh this discussion, because at first he disagreed with me, but then I kind of showed him some stuff from scripture as well. But what was interesting is I was telling him about, our smartphones. We have these smartphones that can just do so much. And
yeah,
what do we do with the power of that? We are on Instagram and on TikTok, and instead of curing cancer and getting rid of disabilities and doing, like, if we would take our minds and the power that these tools give us and actually
yeah,
apply them. But if you don't have the foundation, if you don't have the math and science foundation, you don't know the classics, so you're not well read, or whatever the case may be, because that's more
yeah,
my issue, that I don't know the classics. But if you don't have that foundational base, then you can't go on to do these great things that we should be doing with our minds.
Yep.
And we don't have to worry about going and finding food or going and figuring out what we're going to wear or where we're going to sleep. So we could use
Yep.
our minds to do greater things. And often that's not what we're doing. So
Yep.
the vision that you have there, yeah, is something where it would certainly make the world a better place. So I'm going to get ready to kind of wind it down and get into these final four
Yep.
questions that I asked you last time, but maybe that you got something different this time. My nephew's birthday party starts in like 30 minutes, and then I got to
Okay.
pick up pizza in an hour. So
Yep.
I got to get ready to go because I don't want to be late with his pizza for his
No
party.
problem.
So we're
Happy
gonna
birthday
go
to
ahead.
your nephew.
Yeah, yeah. He turned 6 yesterday, but the party's today. I think he's going as
Mm.
Iron Man or something. So he's all ready for it. So I got to get ready to get up there and get this pizza up there for him. So
Yep.
um so final four questions. First one, do you have a different book that you would recommend from what you said last time? Is there something new that you've seen?
So if you're looking for a book on, again, apologetics more on a college level and above, the return of the God hypothesis, of course, if you are curious about Maxwell's legacy, I would say reading Maxwell's Enduring Legacy would be a great resource. It shows
Okay.
the story, again, of the discovery of the electrons and all these things that came out of one lab. DNA structure came out of that lab, by the way. And so I would say that if you're looking for a book on the more academic side, that's what I recommend. On the faith side, Leonard Ravenhill wrote a book called Why Revival Tarries. And I would encourage that book. That's one of the books I have, Why Revival Tarries, or
Hmm.
America is Too Young to Die. So Leonard Ravenhill, he's the author of both. I would recommend those. Sorry, there's
Okay.
more than one.
Yeah, yeah, it's like 4 books, but that's good. Okay. Interesting quote or scripture from recently. You had a few already, without vision the people perish and some others,
Yeah.
but you have anything that you've been thinking about lately?
Well, one of the ones that I came across, so William Wilberforce, the guy who ended slave trade, this is his stomping ground. So
I
he
saw I
was,
saw the picture. You texted me a picture of or in WhatsApp of
yep,
the there's a statue I think you were in front
yep,
of. Yeah, yeah.
yep. St. John's College. And so I'll tell you a quote tied to him, but he went to St. John's College. He became a believer later on in life, not younger than college. I believe it was college or beyond. He met John and Charles Wesley. He knew that he had a mission. He met John Newton, who told him, fight the fight, to end slavery. And it was so cool to see all of that. But one of the quotes that is next to his statue basically says that it's amazing to see what the conviction of one man, I'm paraphrasing, but basically the conviction of one man can do, like when one man puts his conviction over national self-interest. People didn't want to give up slave trade. Like some of the people were like, what's going to happen to our industry? It's going to fall apart or whatever. Like, how are we going to be sustained in Europe? And Wilberforce didn't care. As far he wanted it to end. So his conviction was put above national self-interest, and his faith. This is what's critical, because some people who want to go on the sort of this tangent of labeling people only by skin color need to realize, no. Wilberforce was pretty wealthy. He could have just hung out and not cared, but he risked his, like his life to end this. So, sorry, I just had a call, but it's gone now. So basically, Wilberforce's quote, that quote about Wilberforce really touches my heart. And so maybe part of my championing is championing a new education paradigm. So that quote really speaks to me.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Any unconventional beliefs that you want to throw out here? I mean, other than the ones you've already been saying, like,
Uh, I really think, and even me for my family, I'm going to go back and really work to establish some of these things I'm saying more and more. But families and parents, I really want to encourage you, don't don't just allow the current paradigm of education and so on to dictate what you're doing with your family. Pause, pray, and ask, okay, these are the children I've been blessed with. How can I lead them in an efficient route to the destination where they can serve the Lord with the gifts they've been given? Let's think of it that way, not this way of, well, Johnny is over in this school district, so he's going to be in third grade next year. Okay, what's his vision for life? If you've seen it, help him to that vision. That's my belief. And I know some people say, well, Amos, they're young, allow them to play. Well, even while people play, people have tendencies, they lean a certain way. Why aren't we helping them, find a mentor to help them grow in that skill? And that's part of why I'm excited that you can help my son hopefully think more about engineering. But that's something that I really think is unconventional, but is necessary. Get your kids
Yeah.
a mentor and help them towards their passion.
Yeah. So don't let your kids play all the time. Is that
Yeah,
that's the unconventional belief? I mean, it's
that's part of
interesting
it.
because people often think of play as being this really, really, really important thing, and you're kind of saying, well, not all the time though.
Correct. I'm
Not
saying half the
always be
time.
a yeah, maybe half the time. Okay.
Half the
All right.
time.
Piece of wisdom for your kids. What's a piece of wisdom you'd want to leave behind for 'em?
Well, I think one of the things, and even personally, that I'm going to be working on is there's a connection between discipline and like there are times where you might not want to do certain things, but you should, right? And there's some things I have to do later today, like some emails and some stuff from back in America I got to get to, and I think about how sometimes I don't want to do it, but I got to do it, right? I will encourage people, especially when they're younger in life, if you find your strengths and you find areas that you're not as strong in, find people that can help you with the areas you're not as strong in. So, for example, administration is not my strength. Like as far as the day-to-day administrative things, but for some people, they thrive, they flourish, they love administration, they love setting up meetings, they love all those things. I just love to dream and think of ways to start new systems and new opportunities, right? And so when I start those things, I need to have people next to me that know how to run those things and maintain those things and love doing that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they don't want to start anything, but they want to run a thing or maintain a thing. And so I need to learn, and we need to learn the importance of working with people that help complement our giftings. And so that's one of the things I would say. And I'll tie it down with this. When I started talking about discipline, God's word is our guide. And one of the things I've seen over and over, as whether it's in physics or chemistry and so on and so on, and with apologetics, it clearly points back to in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's signs in this universe that point to the fact that God made the world. Now, how am I doing with continually growing in the knowledge of His Word and being disciplined in that? That should be the fundamentals of our lives, and we should seek to be disciplined in that and allow God's Word to dictate how we live. And then, as He shows us and gives us opportunities to see our strengths, let's find people to walk alongside us. That's what I want to encourage people with. Let's read our Bibles more because our culture is lacking in that greatly. And let's also make sure we complement our giftings and accomplish the things God has called us to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate you coming on today. How can people get in touch with you?
AmosTheMathGuy@gmail.com or AmosTheMathGuy.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. If you ever want to see any of my writings on apologetics, it's on my website, livingsensibly.org. Livingsensibly.org.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I'm seeing, you have a YouTube channel as well. You've got what, two or three YouTube channels, I think. So
Yep.
you've got
One
some
is
YouTube
more math
channels.
focused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one's the more math, and then one is more like the living sensibly stuff, I think.
Yes.
And
Living
so, yeah,
Sensibly with Amos. Yeah.
yeah, and then your Facebook. If you follow him on Facebook, he's got Facebook Reels all the time, talking about various aspects of specifically STEM education. But like I
Yep.
said, I saw he was in. I saw after you had told me you were in Cambridge that you're in Cambridge, so you're
Yes,
going to be
sir.
there for another 2 weeks. It sounds like
Yep.
so. Okay, and so that's yeah, that's a long time, and I mean,
Yep.
if I go with you next year, I don't know if it's 2.5 weeks. I don't know about that, but
Let's do a
maybe a
week.
week, maybe a
Yep.
week that I can get
Yes,
over
sir.
there and see what's going on at Cambridge. But anything else that you want to talk to the people about before we
Well,
get
I
out of
would
here?
just say, on a practical level, if I can be of help to anybody's family in math, especially, I really want to grow math and science opportunities for families. So even though I'm writing chemistry and physics curriculum, I do use certain textbooks that already exist. Jay Wiles, Discovering Design with Chemistry, Discovering Design with Physics, and so on. And then, yeah, if you need dual credit from a biblical perspective, so anything education, if I can support, let me know. I want to help
Okay,
you flourish in your educating your child. So I just want to mention that on a practical level. So
okay. Well, want to say thanks again to Amos for coming back on the show and wish him well over the next 2 weeks in Cambridge. I'm gonna have some in the YouTube version of this. He's gonna send some more pictures and some videos of Cambridge, so you'll get to kind of see what he's looking at and what he's observing. So he's gonna send some more pictures about that, so you'll be able to see that in the YouTube version of the podcast. But again, want to say special thanks to him. I got to get out of here and go pick up some pizza. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep the faith. Thank you.
Amen.
Was regrafted, or they took a a spring of it and replanted it. So this is continuously